Sequels often get a bad reputation as being a disappointment, ruining the original, or just being in general a bad idea. But I have a few that prove that wrong. Here are my top 10 favorite movie sequels. Number 10, Tron Legacy. And maybe that's because I saw this one first. I didn't see the original until they re-released it on DVD, which was the same time they released this one on DVD, at which point I'd already seen this in the theater. And so going back and watching the original after having watched this one first, I just wasn't impressed by the first one. I found it boring and wasn't all that enthralled by the story, whereas with this one, I loved it. I thought it had style, it had action, I loved the Daft Punk score, and it actually got me into electronica music during my middle school years. I'm still waiting on Tron 3, Disney. Number 9, Toy Story 3. Now, all the Toy Story sequels are great in their own right, but the best of the sequels, in my opinion, is Toy Story 3. It closed out Andy's story very well, it had very complex things about growing up, and it wasn't afraid to go in a bit of a dark direction in certain parts, and the ending is just super emotional. Number 8, Star Trek Into Darkness. This has well-shot action, it expands the lore of this new Star Trek timeline while also paying tribute to the classic Trek, and Benedict Cumberbatch is awesome as Khan, and it gives the story very high stakes. Number 7, Mission Impossible 3. I guess we're going with the J.J. Abrams movie twice in a row. And yes, with the exception of the second Mission Impossible, all of the sequels are fantastic, but the plots in the later entries, except for maybe Ghost Protocol, are all kind of the same to me. Rogue Nation and Fallout kind of blend together for me, but the third one is so unique, because it updates the world of the film, has great action, a fantastic plot, and Philip Seymour Hoffman gives a fantastic and very memorable performance as the villain. Number 6, Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Though this is more of a spoof of the first movie more than an actual sequel, it's still very fun. It's self-aware, it's cheesy, it's a send-up of old monster movies, and I actually prefer it to Gremlins 1. Number 5, How to Train Your Dragon 2. This has a very mature story, Hiccup goes through a ton of growth, and it builds the lore of the first film. The reason I didn't choose 3 is basically just because the villain in 3 just kind of feels the same as the villain in this one. There isn't really anything that unique or special about him. He just kind of feels like a rehash of the villain in this one. And the second one honestly had the better story, though the emotional ending for both 2 and 3 are very good, but I don't think the villain in the third one was necessary. I think the story about just Hiccup and Toothless and having to separate them because Toothless falls in love with the Light Fury probably would have been a better story on its own. But How to Train Your Dragon 2, that's why I prefer 2 over 3. Number 4, X2, XMen United. This is my favorite of the X-Men movies, even if it is a bit dated in certain aspects because it came out in 2002. So a lot of the pop music and a lot of the effects don't really hold up very well. But this has the best plot out of all of them. The opening scene with Nightcrawler is one of my favorite opening scenes in a comic book movie, and it's a ton of fun. Now, even though I do think First Class and Days of Future Past are awesome movies, and I love them, I can't include them on this list because those aren't sequels, they're prequels, technically. That's why they're not on this list. That's why I chose X-Men 2 instead of those. Number 3, Spider-Man 2. This has one of the most dramatic plots for a comic book movie. Alfred Molina is great as Dr. Octopus, and it's awesome because he isn't really a villain. He doesn't make the arms that turn him into a villain with the intention of doing evil. They just kind of is a little arrogant, and he does it with the intent of, doing good with them, but they end up making him crazy. That's what makes him a really interesting character. It also establishes the friendship between Harry and Peter very well, where Harry wants revenge on Spider-Man because he thinks he killed his dad, and not realizing that his best friend is Spider-Man, and then he finds that out at the end of the movie, and you're wondering what's going to happen in the third one, which is why I was so disappointed in the third one. But it's still an awesome movie. Number 2, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This takes everything about comic book movies and just throws it out the window. It's a Tom Clancy-esque thriller with an intriguing plot, a lot of high stakes, and it's a lot of fun. Number 1, my number 1 sequel is Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. And yes, I know it's very cliche. I know if you ask Game, what's your favorite sequel, they're probably going to say Empire Strikes Back. But considering the original was supposed to be this big flop, the original Star Wars only opened in I think 20 theaters or something when it first came out, and everyone thought it was just going to be like this big flop, and then it was this massive success, and then they come out with the sequel, and everyone's like, well, it's a sequel. Sequels are awful. Is they really going to strike gold twice? And it surprised everybody because it did, and it changed sequels forever as we know it because it blew everyone away a second time. It was even better than the first one, and it also has one of the best twist endings in cinema history. One of the best twist reveals, which I'm not going to worry about a spoiler alert. This movie's 40 years old. If you haven't seen it by now, then why are you even watching this? You find out Darth Vader's Luke's father, and the good guys don't win in this one, which is what makes it so unique, because the first one they won, but this one there's a little bit of hope still at the end, but most of it's like, oh, they don't win this time. Han Solo got captured, Lando betrayed them, Luke is questioning everything he knew because Darth Vader is his father, and Obi-Wan told him that his father was killed by Darth Vader, so now he's questioning his whole worldview, and so it really left everyone going, wow, I can't wait for part 3, which sequels never did that. They were usually really terrible. So the fact that this was a truly great movie sequel at a time where sequels were considered really just box office poison, and it was a huge gamble, considering that the first one was a huge gamble, I think it deserves to be number 1 on this list as the best sequel ever. So go ahead and share your ranking of your top 10 favorite movie sequels, and I will see you next time.